Hi, it's Miss Holly from the Talcott Free Library, and I'm going to be reading you Chapter 34, Mortimer. Mortimer's fifth day as guardian of the library was the most momentous of all, but not until the evening. The day had been a busy one. There had been fifth grade graduation and the graduation picnic. So many people had visited his library. They chose books and talked about books and gave Mortimer several more hugs than he actually needed. Some were tighter than others. By the time the families shook out their blankets and packed up their books, their cameras, and their desserts, Mortimer was ready to rest. Miss Shore, the school librarian, had carried over, one at a time, 3 plastic bins full of beautiful picture books. The bins did not fit under the umbrella, but they had rainproof tops, and Mortimer discovered that it was very nice to spread himself across them and gaze at the clouds. He had heard that people thought clouds looked like sheep. That was not Mortimer's experience. He saw a teacup, a jumping frog, a piece of cheese, a snowball. When he had looked at clouds for a long time, Mortimer himself felt a little like a cloud. An orange one, he supposed. A sort of sun cloud. Guardian of the But he interrupted himself. All my fault. Mortimer felt like a cloud that could never let go of its silver rain. He fell asleep and dreamed of Petunia. As soon as the sun got low, the mice began to arrive at the town green. Excited, very loud mice. They woke Mortimer up. One small voice kept shouting about his first grabation, and Mortimer understood that the day was a special one for more than one species in Martinville. A lot of those parent-made desserts had left big crumbs in the grass. Mortimer lazily flipped himself over and saw that a mouse was passing right in front of him. He didn't recognize this one. Mortimer gave him a tired wave. The mouse stopped. I've heard about you. You're the six-toed grouch. Mortimer lifted his head. What? This mouse was hard to hear above the other mice, who were, he guessed, happily gathering cake crumbs. The six-toed grouch? The mouse gave a self-satisfied nod. That's what we call you. Oh, said Mortimer. His heart seemed to shrink a little. The mouse now appeared a little less satisfied with himself. Well? Well, what? Now you're supposed to say something. Okay, something about what? The mouse sighed. Stop playing games. You know, something about how I'm just a grubby little mouse, so who cares what I think? He walked up close to where Mortimer's chin was resting on the edge of the plastic book bin. Are you grubby? Mortimer said. The mouse sat down, or sat up, depending on how you looked at it. His bottom was now planted in the grass, and his front feet were up in the air. That's irrelevant. And now I feel bad, he added. I was just taking the first turn. I thought if I didn't, you would. What's your name? Mortimer asked. Fred. Yours? It's Mortimer, but everyone calls me Goldie, or Sunshine, or Buffy, or Dear Cat. Mortimer, said Fred. It was good to hear someone say it. Mortimer suddenly wondered how long it had been since someone had called him by his own name. Chase me, Mortimer, chase me. It's true, Mortimer asked. What you said. Everyone calls me the six-toed grouch? The mouse looked down. Yes. No. I mean, only everyone I know. Even lying next to a suitcase full of poetry. Mortimer felt very much alone when he heard that. Look on the bright side, though. At least you aren't the six-toed monster. Monster? Mortimer lifted his head. Or the gray horror. Or the striped destroyer. What were all these names supposed to mean? Well, no. I'm orange, Mortimer said. The mouse nodded. Yes, I can see that. It was time to change the subject. Do you like poetry? Mortimer asked. The mouse scoffed. I don't have time to read. I'm a wild animal. Don't you know what that means? It means I have to find all my own food and shelter. I have to be always looking out for owls, hawks, possums, and you know, he trailed off. Cats? Guessed Mortimer. Yes, cats. And I must keep my brothers and sisters fed and warm and safe. I certainly do not have time to read. I shouldn't even be standing here talking to you. I should be over there, gathering crumbs with the others. Mortimer thought guiltily of his food dish and the comfortable chair he usually shared with Miss Scoggin by the warm fire, and Al's too tight hugs. He thought about mouse doors 1 through 5 and how he'd forced the mice, so many of them over the years, to leave just as soon as they'd come in, all to protect Mr. Brock's cheese and Al's apples. The ghost barely ate any of it. Why had he not shared? Maybe he was much worse than a grouch. Say sorry, his heart said, still feeling shrunk. I'm sorry, Mortimer said. The worst part, he admitted, only to himself, was that he had known the mice had hard lives. Of course he had known. He just thought it had nothing to do with him. Oh well, the mouse waved at him. I'm sorry I called you a grouch. And my life's not so bad. I have my family, my brothers and sisters. I'd be lost without them. Mortimer nodded, staring glumly at his front paws, and thought about Petunia. Following his gaze, Fred seemed to remember Mortimer's 12 front claws. Extra toes are nice, I think. Nothing wrong with that. He took one step backward. I'll bet the gray horror wishes he had 6 toes on every foot. Something clicked. Mortimer looked sharply at Fred. Are you saying, Mortimer said, that the gray horror is real? A real cat? Oh, yes, very real. Lives on Elm Street. I guess you don't know him. And the Striped Destroyer? Also real? Mortimer was trying not to get his hopes up. Hope, said his heart in a small voice. Fred nodded. The Striped Destroyer lives over by the train station. Good eating there, especially on holiday weekends. Mortimer hesitated. And the 6-toed monster, he whispered. Real? Sure, she's just like you. 6 on every foot. She lives in Grantville, at the movie theater, which is just incredibly frustrating, to be honest. We could eat for a month on what gets dropped at that movie theater on a single weekend. But Mortimer was on his feet, his heart swelling with hope. Hope, hope, hope. It rushed at him from every direction. Petunia, his heart shouted. With great speed, Fred retreated to the other side of the poetry suitcase. We aren't going to fight now, are we? No, no, Mortimer said. He sat down in order to appear less large. No fighting. Mortimer couldn't see the whole thing yet, but an idea was starting to form inside him, like clouds gathering into a shape. He would go to Grantville to see if Petunia was the 6-toed monster. But first he had to do something else. Can you bring your brothers and sisters? He asked Fred. Bring them here? I know a safe place where there are apples and potatoes and cheese. And not just today, every day. Really? Fred looked at him closely. But it isn't a trick, is it? If I bring them, they'll be safe? No tricks, Mortimer said. Safe. Hurry, Fred. Chapter 35. Mortimer. While he waited for Fred to come back, Mortimer looked around at his library and thought about all the people who had visited it in just these few days. He thought about Winnie D. and Mrs. Baker, and Mr. Gregorian, and Miss Shore, and everyone else who had brought a book or left one. He thought about faces like question marks, and the beautiful smell of books, and the night of the fire. Guardian of the library, he tried to tell himself. Not quite, his heart said, because what he was guarding was not the library. Mortimer was guarding a secret. 10 minutes later, Fred returned with a line of brothers and sisters in tow. I could only get 8, he said. Everyone else refused to leave the picnic. 8 brothers and sisters, Mortimer thought. Imagine it. Fred introduced them. Fern, Flora, Finn, good old Finn, Frank, Fiona, Faye, Fergus, and Flavia. All F's, Mortimer said, waving at Finn, who gave him a small wave back. Really? Frank said. All F's? I never noticed that. Mortimer looked at him. He's kidding, Flavia shouted. Of course we've noticed. Mortimer scanned the brave line of them and said, I need your help. A few minutes later, they had a very basic plan. The mice would enter the history house through one of its 5 mouse doors, while Mortimer got himself let in by Al through the front door. They would all meet up at the fireplace in the parlor. 5, Flavia shouted. Ha! There are 9 mouse holes in that house. At least 9. 9? Mortimer repeated. Is this another joke? The mice assured him that it wasn't. Well, okay. Mortimer's confidence was slightly shaken, but there was no time to dwell on it. 9 doors. Take your pick, I guess. When Al lets me in, I'll run straight to the parlor and jump up on the mantel. That's where we keep the matches. Can you even jump that high? Flavia shouted. You look kind of old. Of course I can, Mortimer said. The truth was that he planned to use Miss Scoggins' chair to help get himself on the mantle. Once he was in the back of the chair, it was easy to hop over. But he didn't explain this to the very loud Flavia, who was beginning to remind him of Petunia. Where was I? He said. In the parlor, Faye said. On the mantle, Finn added, with the matches. Right. And you remember the rest of it? They did. Except you haven't told us why, Flavia shouted. What is all this for? It's for telling the truth, Mortimer told her. And by the way, don't run away if Miss Scoggins screams a lot right at the beginning. She's afraid of mice. But once we get started, I think she'll pay attention. They nodded and looked at him expectantly. Did I forget anything? Mortimer asked. Fred cleared his throat. Well, there is one detail, but it's not important right now, I suppose. Where are the apples? Flavia shouted. Where is the cheese? And where is my poem? Fred said you have poems here, and I have never tasted one. Mortimer explained. The mice did not remember the night of the library fire. Mice, to put it bluntly, do not live that long. But they had heard about it. We call it the terrible fire, Fred had told him. Every mouse pup hears the story. It's why we never, ever pick up, matches, Mortimer said. Yes, Fred shuddered. So you can see that we're really going the extra mile here. Breaking our rule for you, I mean. I am grateful, Mortimer said. A one-time performance? We will need to be very convincing. We're ready, Finn said. Let's go, Flavia shouted. She thrust a tiny fist into the air. Showtime, Fred said. Cheese time, Flavia shouted. Apple time. She gave a little jump, landing on her back feet with her hands clasped over her head. Potato time! Finn rolled his eyes. Flavia began to wobble, and Faye put out a hand to steady her. Mortimer looked at the mice and felt something. Longing, his heart said. And then Fred gave a practice whistle, and everyone scattered.